Want to see these videos 5 days early and gain access to other exclusive perks? Then head on over to my Patreon in the description. Every contribution means the world to me. The third series of Thomas the Tank Engine, my beloved. While my opinions on the classic era change from time to time since I did those reviews years ago, my love for Series 3 remains the same. But one thing that's rarely talked about in regards to Series 3, at least in a big retrospective way, is the early narration dubs for the UK. For the 2% of you who have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about, here's some history. Series 3 was Thomas's big comeback to television after going on hiatus since Series 2 aired in 1986, and following the success of those first two series in both America thanks to Shining Time Station, and Japan allowing the show to get funding from Fuji TV, this was the first time a Thomas series was filmed to premiere in other countries outside the UK, as well as the first time they adapted stories not written by Wilbur Tawdry or his son Christopher, to a very mixed reaction from people.
Rule 55. You can't do it.
But most prominently, during the filming process, the episodes were filmed in 2 batches. Unlike the previous 2, where all 26 episodes were filmed together, Series 3 had its first 16 episodes filmed in one batch, and the remaining 10 filmed later in another. Fans have since nicknamed these batches 3A and 3B respectively, and you will notice many differences in these batches with different sets, new locations, unique character faces, etc. All 16 episodes of 3A were released straight to VHS in the UK in 1991, before both 3A and 3B were finally broadcast together on UK TV a year later in 1992. Nothing is really known as to why Series 3 was released like this. Was it the model display at Hamleys causing delays? Were they trying to make money back as soon as possible after Clearwater Features went bankrupt from the failure of Tugs? Nobody knows. The UK dub of Series 3 saw the debut of the soon-to-be longest-running narrator for Thomas and Friends, Michael Angelis.
Beep, beep! Good morning, Percy, he whistled.
Those bastards broke into my house, stole my wife's fur coats and jewellery, kidnapped my daughter and subjected her to a night of terror, and then they ripped me off for 25,000 quid.
Who would narrate the show from Series 3 in 1991 all the way to Series 16 in 2012. From what I understand, some of his very first attempts at narrating the scripts, perhaps even the first attempts, were used for these early UK releases in 1991. The first 8 episodes on Time for Trouble and Other Stories, and the next 8 being released on Trust Thomas and Other Stories. The UK would then eventually get Escape and Other Stories in 1992, containing the last 10 episodes, released alongside re-releases of the first 2 tapes, using Angelis's redubs that were broadcasted on TV. This led to the early releases and later official UK releases having distinct differences, specifically some scenes having missing music, and each episode having different sounding narration. Sometimes there would be additional dialogue that was cut for the official releases, leaving awkward moments of silence, or letting Angelis slow down with reading the lines. Sometimes the shots that were cut to match the early dubs would fall out of sync with the new narration. Sometimes a character wouldn't have their distinctive voices provided by Angelis like James's Scouse accent, though that was already an inconsistency before the new dubs. So for this video, rather than listing each difference, I thought it would be fun to do a bit of a versus match. Early dubs versus official dubs. Watching the Unlucky Tug's recent video on the restored versions of Series 1 to 3 put me in a very Series 3 mood, so I figured, what better subject to cover? I'll go through each of the 16 episodes, 8 on each tape, then I'll note the differences as to why I prefer one over the other. And before you ask, yes, I know some of the early dubs affected the US dub done by George Carlin, but I'm not here to talk about them. I'm here more to express opinions than state facts about the differences. Alright, let's get started with Time for Trouble and Other Stories.
Scarves!
Okay, so right off the bat, I'm split on which dub to choose. For the early dub, a big thing that irked me was how close the narration was cut together. The opening scene with Thomas and Percy freezing in the snow in particular suffers from this. feeling like none of the characters wait even a second before talking.
Firelighter knows that he's late. He's not late, replied Percy. This weather woke us up early. Why don't we talk about something else? Shivered Percy. Yes, like how silly we'll look when our funnels turn into icicles.
Not to mention, this really feels like a first attempt at reading the script. Very similar to an issue I have with Michael Brandon as a narrator, here Angelus feels like he's piecing together how to say the lines as he's reading them. It's hard to explain, but just give it a listen.
He was looking forward to taking important visitors on a tour of the railway, and had pressed his special trousers. I shall put them in my trunk, and change into them just before the photographs are taken.
The official dub feels more refined, having sentences being more spaced out, and having a more confident-sounding Angelus.
All I want is a warm boiler, Huff Thomas. Firelighter knows that. He's late. He's not late, replied Percy. This cold weather woke us up early. Why don't we talk about something else, shivered Percy. Yes, like how silly we look when our funnels turn into icicles. That's not funny.
Specifically, the groan from Percy as the baggage lands on him is much louder and more distinctive in the official dub.
Oh, groaned Percy. Oh, groaned Percy.
But I have my issues with this dub too. The sentences may be more spaced out, but I think that's because whoever was in charge of editing forgot to cut the breaths out. As a result, especially if you're watching in the VHS copy, you'll hear a lot of loud breathing in between lines.
It was time for the photographs. Everyone was excited. The Fat Controller was waiting on the platform for his trousers. They were in a trunk amongst a big load of baggage.
There's also little moments that are done better in the early dub. The lack of narration over the close-up of Henry's funnel makes the joke funnier, getting to hear that music cue.
Engines don't wear scarves. Engines with proper funnels do, replied Percy. You've only got a small one.
Engines don't wear scarves. Engines with proper funnels do, replied Percy. You've only got a small one.
And I don't know, when the Fat Controller shouts at Percy in the early dub, his voice isn't as deep as it's meant to be, but it somehow sounds more threatening.
Mine, he said. Percy, look at this. My best trousers, too. We must pay the passengers for their spoiled clothes, and my trousers are ruined. I hope this will teach you not to play tricks with the coaches.
Mine, he said. Percy, look at this. My best trousers, too. We must pay the passengers for their spoiled clothes. And my trousers are ruined. I hope this will teach you not to play tricks with the coaches.
It's my preferred version of that scene. I'm going to say this round is a draw. Both the early and official dubs of A Scar for Percy are a good way to watch the episode for their own reasons. Starting off this versus match with 1-1.
I only swept the floor this morning.
Yeah, this was a certified victory for the official dub this time around. The early dub, while the sentences aren't too close together like A Scar for Percy, we now have the opposite problem where lines have strange pauses to match with the timing of the cuts.
Hello, Thomas. You look cheerful. I wish I could take children today instead of trucks.
Hello, Thomas. You look cheerful. I wish I could take children today instead of trucks.
This line from Harold is weirdly spaced out compared to the official.
Later, Percy saw Harold. Sorry, Percy. Can't talk. I'm on high alert.
Later, Percy saw Harold. Sorry, Percy. Can't talk. I'm on high alert.
Percy's various grunts throughout the episode sound quieter and have less oomph.
Ugh! He shivered and thought of his nice dry shed.
Oh! He shivered and thought of his nice dry shed.
Oh, hissed Percy, the water is sloshing my fire.
Oh! hissed Percy. The water is sloshing my fire.
Particularly when he says ow from the crate of hot drinks landing on him.
Something thudded onto Percy's boiler. Ow! Exclaimed Percy. He needn't throw things.
Something thudded onto Percy's boiler. Ow! Exclaimed Percy. He needn't throw things.
The only thing going for the early dub is no music in this scene when Percy comes to pick up the children, allowing us to hear just how heavy the rain is.
Annie and Clarabelle were glad when Percy arrived. He was just in time. The rain streamed down Percy's boiler.
But then the music in the official dub works better at creating an ominous setting before Percy's soon-to-be dangerous journey.
Dark clouds loomed ahead. Annie and Clarabelle were glad when Percy arrived. He was just in time. Rain streamed down Percy's boiler.
While said official dub is still very breathy, Angelus's character voices sound more natural, particularly for Harold, and is so, by default, a better experience. Early dub 1, official dub 2.
Get on, you!
So I went into this one expecting to prefer the early dub, I couldn't tell you why, but I ended up preferring the official one. Again, the narration in the early dub is cut to the timing of the stories more proficiently, but like with the scar for Percy, they're too close together, so Angelus sounds like he's talking at 100 miles an hour.
The Fat Controller decided that Gordon needed a rest. James, she'll do your work, he said kindly. Take me back to the station, it's an emergency. Henrietta hated leaving Toby.
Also, I noticed this weird pronunciation.
We must clear the line for James with the express.
Damn, it's the origin of his Series 5 Fat Controller voice. The one minuscule thing this has over the official dub is that the little boy mocking James at the end sounds funnier in the early dub.
Coo, said one. The Express is late and it's got 2 engines. I think James couldn't pull it on his own, so Toby had to help him.
Coo, said one. The Express is late and it's got 2 engines. I think James couldn't pull it on his own, so Toby had to help him.
The official dub also cuts out a bunch of unnecessary lines, like this one with James.
Look at me, I'm the smartest, most useful engine on the line. You know, little Toby, he boasted.
You know, little Toby, he boasted.
And does away with the ending line about Toby smiling because we can already see he is, and allows us to hear a funnier sounding sarcastic laugh from James.
Never mind, James, whispered Toby. They're only joking. Ha, said James. Toby just smiled.
Never mind, James, whispered Toby. They're only joking. Ha ha, said James.
Maybe this versus match is going to be more one-sided than I thought. Early dub 1, official dub 3.
They aren't respectable.
And lo and behold, right as I say that, we find an episode where the early dub is better. This one also has additional lines, but unlike Time for Trouble, taking them out in the official dub creates these weird, awkward silences.
He left early next morning. Gordon was still complaining. Good riddance, he grumbled. Chattering all night. Who is he anyway?
He left early next morning. Good riddance, Gordon grumbled, chattering all night. Who is he anyway?
Take no notice, soothed Edward. He's just jealous. He thinks no engine should be famous but him. Look, he's coming now.
Take no notice, soothed Edward. He's just jealous. Look, he's coming now.
The fact that the narration timing is much better than previous early dubs is also a winning factor. And again, much less breaths left in than the official dub.
That, said Doc proudly, is a celebrity. A what? Asked Percy. A celebrity is a very famous engine, replied Doc. Driver says we can talk to him soon.
That, said Doc proudly, is a celebrity. Oh, what? Asked Percy. A celebrity is a very famous engine, replied Doc. Driver says we can talk to him soon.
I am slowly starting to think that maybe these official dubs, while more refined in some ways, were recorded in somewhat of a haste to meet a deadline with the episodes being broadcasted on TV. So they either ran out of time or forgot to cut out the breathing. The one thing that the official dub has is that Angelus's voice for Gordon is more consistent, but that's about it. +1 for the early dubs, making the score 2-3.
Quack, quack, quack. What?
Another tie. This time, both dubs have their strengths and weaknesses. There's the standard lack of breathing sounds in the official dub, and then the official dub having more energetic deliveries where needed.
Look, Doc. Look what's under your bunker. It's a nest box with an egg in it. Then Doc laughed too. You win, Donald. It'd take a clever engine to get the better of you.
Look, Doc. Look what's under your bunker. It's a nest box with an egg in it. Then Doc laughed too. You win, Donald. It'd take a clever engine to get the better of you.
But the most noticeable difference is the lack of music playing in this scene with Duck running on his branch line for the first time in the early dub. On the one hand, the early dub feels more atmospheric with the focus more on the Foley sounds, and it fits the calmer nature of Thomas and Friends.
Sea breezes swirled his smoke high into the air and his green paint glistened in the sunlight. This is just like being on holiday, he puffed. Well, you know what they say, laughed his driver. A change is as good as a rest.
But with the music in the official dub, the scene feels more cinematic as we hear an elongated Ducks theme.
Sea breezes swirled his smoke high into the air and his green paint glistened in the sunlight. This is just like being on holiday, he puffed. Well, you know what they say, laughed his driver. A change is as good as a rest.
Also, a more minuscule difference is that while Angelus's voice for Donald is more consistently squeaky in the early dub, a part of me does prefer his more deeper sounding voice for him in various scenes.
Nay, dude, who's behind this? Laughed Donald.
Nay, dude, who's behind this? Laughed Donald.
Both dubs are as good as each other, so the score now sits at 3-4.
Careful, Thomas.
This next one is also a tie, but that's only because, and I shit you not, I have nothing to say about either dub. Maybe it's because Thomas Gets Bumped is my least favourite episode of Series 3, but I have neither high praise nor disliking towards either of these dubs. I mean, I guess there's this additional line at the end of the early dub getting cut out for the official.
That's all right, Thomas. I like to make new friends, but I'm glad to share them with you. You're a good friend indeed, replied Thomas, and always will be. Oh, that's all right, Thomas. I like to make new friends, but I'm glad to share them with you. Bertie, said Thomas, you're a very good friend indeed.
And the same issues with the official dub being full of breathing sounds. But that's it. This is a very quick one and done tie, only because I feel so half-assed about this episode. The score is now 4-5.
Where are you going? Asked Percy. Home for tea.
This episode was interesting because while the early dub was the winner for me, it was a very narrow victory, like it's the minuscule details that keep it one step ahead from being a tie. I think the conversation between Thomas and Percy in the sheds sounds more natural in the early dub.
Wake up, Thomas. Are you dreaming about the time you thought I was a ghost? Certainly not. Anyway, I was only pretending to be scared. I knew it was you, really. Oh, really? Exclaimed Percy. I am surprised. I always thought you were afraid of the dark. I wonder why.
Whereas in the official, the loudness that Angelus goes for feels a bit forced.
Wake up, Thomas. Are you dreaming about the time you thought I was a ghost? Certainly not. Anyway, I was only pretending to be scared. I knew it was you, really. Oh, really? Exclaimed Percy. I am surprised. I'd always thought you were afraid of the dark. I wonder why.
I also think this scene where Henry passes Percy sounds better without the music that's present in the official dub.
Henry arrived with his goods train. The signalman switched the points and Percy waited on the siding until Henry had steamed by.
Henry arrived with his goods train. The signalman switched the points and Percy waited on the siding until Henry had steamed by.
I know that's like a really small thing to point out, but I don't know, it reminds me a bit of Series 1 playing out like this. The only thing it does slightly worse than the official dub is that Percy sounds very quiet and less frantic whenever he sees the dragon.
Help! Cried Percy. I'm not going to open my eyes until my driver comes.
Help! Cried Percy. I'm not going to open my eyes until my driver comes.
Help! Save me! Cried Percy.
Help! Save me! Cried Percy.
But other than that, it beats out the official dub by small points in its favour. Both dubs are now back to being neck and neck with each other, with the scores at 5-5.
Good morning.
There is one big difference in the early dub of this episode that almost made this match a tie, and that is Diesel's voice. Fans who watched my Series 3 review from a while ago will know that I'm not the biggest fan of Angelus's voice for Diesel. We went from the devious and very pompous voice from Ringo in Series 2.
Your worthy Sir Topham Hatt thinks I need to learn. He is mistaken. I see you like jokes. You made a good joke about me yesterday. I laughed and laughed.
To a snivelling, unthreatening bully.
Your worthy fat, Sir Topham Hatt sent me. So who's going to tell him, I wonder? Said Diesel. Two little goody-goody telltales like you, I suppose.
And the one major thing that the early dub has over the official dub is that the voice Angelus uses for Diesel, while still nasally, is much more held back.
Your worthy fat Sir Topham Hatt sent me, replied Diesel. Now who's going to tell him, I wonder, said Diesel. Two little goody-goody telltales like you, I suppose.
If I were basing this round on just the Diesel voice alone, the early dub would have won. However, there are little improvements in the official dub that make it the better option. The sound of the trucks screaming as Diesel bumps them is funnier.
Oh, scream the trucks. Grrr, growled Diesel. Oh, scream the trucks. Grrr, growled Diesel.
The Fat Controller's voice is more consistent throughout the episode, and line deliveries like this one where Diesel bumps into Percy just sound better.
He went, bump, straight into Percy. Percy had an awful fright. He went bump, straight into Percy. Percy had an awful fright.
The breathing is annoying again, but ultimately the official dub wins this round, taking the lead again as we end Time for Trouble and Other Stories with a score of 5-6. Next stop, Trust Thomas and Other Stories.
It's peaceful, he said to Henry.
Well, what an episode to kick off this tape, am I right? You'd think with this being my favourite Thomas and Friends episode of all time that I'd easily give this round to the official dub, as it's the version I grew up with. Yet somehow, the early dub managed to win me over. It wasn't anything like the lines matching more consistently with the timing of the footage, it wasn't the lack of breathing sounds present in the official dub, but it was, instead, the quietness of Angelus's voice. I'm starting to notice that the official dubs have him be a lot more shouty than the early dubs, sometimes in places where he doesn't need to be. And for such a chilled out, peaceful story like Henry's Forest, his more laid-back voice for the early dub narration fits the tone of the story better.
Come on, Henry, he would say. We've made good time today. We'll stop for a while by the forest. Come on, Henry, he would sometimes say. We've made good time today. We'll stop for a while by the forest. Look, Henry, called Terence. We're beginning again. The hillside will look better than ever before. You'll see. Look, Henry, called Terence. We're beginning again. The hillside will look better than ever before. You'll see.
I think by this point he'd got past the awkwardness from these stories from his first time reading them, and his confidence keeps going up. I do think the ending is better in the official dub as they cut out a bunch of unnecessary lines so he doesn't have to read the script at the speed of sound.
Now Henry can see the new trees growing strong and tall, and the animals that were frightened away are coming back. Sometimes it is very quiet, and at other times Henry can hear leaves rustling or a bird's wing brushing the air. Often he can hear the distant sound of children laughing, and always he is happy here. Now Henry can see the trees growing strong and tall, and the animals are coming back. Sometimes everywhere is quiet. At other times, Henry can hear leaves rustling or a bird's wing brushing the air. Often he can hear the sound of children laughing, and always he is happy here.
But for the vast majority of this episode, he sounds better in the early dub. We're now back to equal numbers again, as the early dub's victory for Henry's Forest brings the score to 6-all.
Goodness gracious.
Another tie? Damn, the early dub is not going down without a fight, isn't it? I was going to hand it to the official dub for subtle differences where it was better, such as James sounding more scared as he slides down the hill.
He couldn't pull the train at all. Help! Help! Whistled James. He couldn't pull the train at all. Help! Help! Whistled James.
And how the ending in the early dub feels awkward without the music cue.
Dirty or clean, I'm a famous machine, murmured Gordon, but no one heard but him. Dirty or clean, I'm a famous machine, murmured Gordon, but no one heard but him.
But the early dub managed to hold its ground. Not just with one or two line deliveries sounding better towards the beginning, you know, less shouty and all that.
Hello, Gordon, called Thomas. You look as if you've had a mud bath. Be a sensible engine. Have a shower instead. Hello, Gordon, called Thomas. You look as if you've had a mud bath. Be a sensible engine and have a shower instead.
But there's one line of narration present in the early dub that's more faithful to the book's version of this story.
Then he pulled trucks for the rest of the day. He bumped them hard. Then he pulled trucks for the rest of the day. Goods trains, he spluttered. He felt his position deeply.
So Gordon had to spend his time pulling trucks. Goods trains, he muttered. He felt his position deeply.
Which is weird considering how this episode is infamously rewritten to be its own thing separate from the original story. But yeah, that one line of fateful narration keeps it from completely losing this round. We are now at 7-all.
I'm the pride of the line.
Okay, this might be the strangest discovery I've made so far watching the early dubs. Remember that one line from James back in Time for Trouble when he talks to Toby? Well, turns out they used the exact same line that was originally used for this episode when James brags to Thomas and Percy. Literally the same take. Take a listen.
Look at me, I'm the smartest, most useful engine on the line. Look at me, I'm the smartest, most useful engine on the line.
This line was written specifically for No Joke for James because it feels so out of place in Time for Trouble, so why did they put it there? Did they think the silence was too awkward and so looked through all the other episodes for something to fill in the empty space, only to change their minds later for the official dub? That's so weird. Anyway, that's about the biggest thing I have to say about the two dubs for No Joke for James because, in all honesty, these two dubs are almost on equal grounds. While the early dub has Angelus doing a more consistent, deep voice for Gordon, the scene where the Fat Controller tells James off feels very robotic compared to the official.
Some jokes are funny, but not this one, James. You have caused confusion. You will stay in your shed until you are wanted. Some jokes are funny, but not this one, James. You have caused confusion. You will stay in your shed until you are wanted.
And there's just a bunch of unnecessary narration, particularly with the ending.
Yes, indeed. The Fat Controller turned to James. Once again, you are a really useful engine. Yes, indeed. James, once again, you are a really useful engine.
The official dub, meanwhile, has all those things over the early dub, plus more energy in Angelus's delivery, which I think is sorely needed for a story like this one. The official dub, once again, crawls back into the lead, with the score now 7-8.
Who do we appreciate?
The wind's too strong. I've been grounded.
For this episode, like with Donald's Duck, the early dub has a lack of music playing in the beginning, that being the theme of the post train. Though what confuses me is that the song begins, but then it cuts off right before it's about to hit the second part of the song.
One train is pulled by Thomas and the other by Percy, as the loads are too heavy for one engine to do the work alone. The post is loaded into trucks at both the harbours, and the engines pull their trains through the silent stations.
And this would be fine if they didn't then play the rest of the song later in the episode. So, what the hell happened? Was it done in a rush? Was the audio file lost? Nobody really knows, but it means we go the entire scene, and the rest of the beginning of the episode for that matter, without music. From the moment the post-train theme cuts off to when Harold talks to Percy next morning, there is not a single piece of music to be heard.
Let's make up for lost time. Percy puffed along as quickly as he could, but the sun was already rising as he finished his work. Let's make up for lost time. Percy puffed along as quickly as he could, but the sun was already rising as he finished his work.
So weird. As a result, the official dub wins mainly for having the music back in place, making the opening feel less uncomfortable. Harold's voice also sounds better, as does the narration, particularly for the ending letter where it sounds like Angelus is disinterested in the early dub.
He thinks you're both splendid, said the Fat Controller. And everyone says that the post train is the pride of the line. He thinks you are both splendid, said the Fat Controller. And everyone says that the post train is the pride of the line.
We stand at a much more prominent lead for the official dubs now, with a score of 7-9.
They're busy with their breakfast.
Yet another tie between the dubs. Crazy, right? There's the standard upsides and downsides to each, like the early dub narration matching more with the cuts.
Bad luck, Bertie. Now, if you were a steam engine, you would run on a pair of reliable rails. Huh, replied Bertie. The railway was supposed to deliver tar to mend the road 2 weeks ago. You can't trust a thing that runs on rails. I run on rails. Bad luck, Bertie, said Thomas. Now, if you were a steam engine, you would run on a pair of reliable rails. Huh,
replied Bertie. The railway was supposed to deliver tar to mend the road 2 weeks ago. You can't trust a thing that runs on rails. I run on rails.
And the official dub having more energy in places, but there are individual bright spots that make them neck and neck. For example, this scene where Thomas says hello to Bertie. The official dub is better not just for the additional line of Thomas asking Bertie if he wants to race again, calling back to Series 1, but when Bertie hits a hole in the road, it's funnier.
Hello, Bertie. But all Bertie could say was, ouch, that's another hole in the road.
Hello, Bertie. Care for a race today? But all Bertie could say was, ouch, that's another hole in the road.
Meanwhile, in terms of voices, James actually has his Scouse accent that's missing from the official dub.
What a good idea, agreed James. Look, here comes Thomas. I'll start pretending now.
What a good idea, agreed James. Look, here comes Thomas. I'll start pretending now.
And the truck's voices sound less shouty and ear-grating.
We couldn't pay James back for bumping us, so we'll play tricks on Thomas instead. One engine is as good as another. We couldn't pay James back for bumping us, so we'll play tricks on Thomas instead. One engine is as good as another.
Then in this scene where Thomas crashes, the driver yelling "slow down" sounds more frantic in the early dub.
Slow down, called Thomas's driver, and applied the brakes.
Slow down, called Thomas's driver and applied the brakes.
But then Thomas sounds more upset about his crash in the official dub.
Bust my buffers, muttered Thomas. The day started so well, too.
Bust my buffers, muttered Thomas. The day started so well, too.
Overall, each dub is different enough to warrant you watching it, so either option is good, bringing the score to 8-10. The early dubs now need 3 wins in a row to beat the official dubs. Can they do it?
Fiddlesticks.
Yeah, there was no way the early dub was going to win with this episode. It's a very comedic story, so the more shouty and energetic narration from the official dub works miles better, particularly with Toby getting annoyed.
Trucks, he grumbled, should be where you want them when you want them.
Trucks, he grumbled, should be where you want them when you want them.
I can't waste time playing Hunt the Trucks with you. Take them yourself.
I can't waste time playing Hunt the Trucks with you. Take them yourself.
Mavis grunting as she tries to move on the icy rails.
Grrr, up, ordered Mavis. Grrr, ah, wailed Mavis.
Grrr, up, ordered Mavis. Grrr, ah, wailed Mavis.
And Toby's sarcasm when he rescues her.
Having trouble, Mavis? chortled Toby. I am surprised. Gosh, said Mavis.
Having trouble, Mavis? chortled Toby. I am surprised. Gosh, said Mavis.
Other than that, just the standard issues with the early dub occasionally sounding more obviously like a first reading attempt, and the official dub, again, full of breathing sounds. But it didn't stop the official dub from winning this round, as the scores are now 8-11. The early dubs have no chance of winning now, but let's see if they can claw back some wins.
Toby's a fusspot.
I was split on both sides for a majority of the episode, right up until Toby's runaway scene. The early dub just doesn't do the sequence justice, being too quiet for what's supposed to be a dangerous runaway, and clashes with the music trying so hard to carry the rest of the scene on its back.
On, they yelled, giving him a fearful bump. Toby was away, with the truck screaming and yelling behind him. Stop, stop, cried Toby. His driver fought for control.
The official dub does a much better job at raising the intensity, with Angelus sounding much louder and frantic as Toby's life is put in danger.
On, they yelled. Toby was away with the truck screaming and yelling behind him. Stop, stop, cried Toby. His driver fought for control.
The only 2 small points I'll give the early dub is the line that's not present in the official dub.
They came nearer and nearer to the bridge.
They came nearer and nearer to the bridge. It was all or nothing now.
And the music that plays when Mavis rescues Toby.
Then she helped Toby to safety.
That's strangely not heard in the official dub, making the rescue feel kind of awkward.
Then she helped Toby to safety.
but those small points are just that, small. The official dub wins again, 8-12. Man, things were looking so promising for the early dubs too.
I'm not dozing, I'm resting.
Alrighty, last episode, and there's actually something funny I want to point out about the early dub for this one. So there's no music playing in the beginning when the narrator introduces Trevor, and because of that, you can subtly hear the sound of Trevor hitting a plank of wood.
Trevor the traction engine is old-fashioned, but he doesn't care.
I find that cute. It's like this was the best take they had of Trevor driving around, so the editor had a laugh and decided to add in that sound just for jokes. You can still kinda hear it in the official dub, but you do have to listen carefully through the music.
Trevor the traction engine is old-fashioned, but he doesn't care.
It doesn't add or take away anything from either dub, I just found it funny. As for the episode itself, both dubs do a pretty solid job and were almost neck and neck for small moments. Like how Edward saying everything is going to be alright sounds less weird in the early dub.
Don't worry, he said. Everything is going to be all right. Don't worry, he said. Everything is going to be all right.
And the passengers' more excited reaction to the posters in the official dub.
Look, they said. The vicar is holding a party. We must go to that. Look, they said. The vicar is holding a party. We must go to that.
But there's one thing that allowed the official dub to grab yet another win, and that's Bertie. He sounds more cheeky in the official dub, which fits his role in the story of putting Trevor down only to be proven wrong later.
I'll be there too, boasted Bertie. I'm not sure people will want to ride on an old traction engine after travelling in a smart red bus like me. I'll be there too, boasted Bertie. I'm not sure people will want to ride on an old traction engine after travelling in a smart red bus like me.
A more fitting voice can service the story very well. I also guess by this point I've just grown numb to Angelus's loud breathing because I don't recall it happening as much. Regardless, we end this round and the versus match overall with the final scores. So, in this versus match, there were 3 wins for the early dubs, 8 wins for the official dubs, and 5 ties, bringing the final total to 8 points for the early dubs and 13 points for the official dubs. Time for Trouble and Other Stories had things end in a narrow victory for the official dubs, with the early dubs holding their own with 2 wins and 3 draws, so they were losing, but only just. Then with Trust Thomas and Other Stories, they got 1 at the start, tried their best to keep pace with 2 more draws, but ultimately failed in the final 3. The official dubs were the clear winners by the end, though at the very least it wasn't an absolute massacre. The early dubs did really well, and as a result, this experiment was not a massive waste of time. Just a small waste of time. A part of me can't help but feel sorry for Michael Angelos with these dubs, to be honest. Series 3 was his first series as narrator, the first UK narrator to take over from Ringo Starr, and his debut in Series 3A was pushed straight to VHS. While his early dubs were still good, they were plagued with awkward line readings, the sentences being cut too close together, and lines that needed to be trimmed down. Then a year later, when his narration finally aired on UK TV, these official dubs, while an improvement for the most part, had their own problems. Either sounding too forced, still sounding too fast, and those godforsaken breaths that were not cut out. All in an attempt to make him sound more consistent with his narration in Series 3B, but even that failed because it sounds like they used a different microphone in 3B.
Mavis is a diesel engine who works for the quarry company, shunting trucks in their sidings. One morning, Duck and Percy noticed that the horizon was packed with sails, flapping against the blue sky.
He got dealt a really bad hand for his debut in Thomas and Friends. Thankfully, he improved a lot for the following Series 4, 5 and 6, not only slowing down, but they also cut out his breaths so he doesn't sound like he's slowly inflating.
On starry nights when the moon is full and the air still, you can hear the sounds of faraway ships and distant laughter. Get out of my way! But the truck wouldn't move. Until Gordon forced it. By accident. The driver tried to put on the brakes, but Thomas couldn't stop. Oh boy!
Regardless of which UK dub of Series 3 you go for, you're still in for a treat of watching one of the greatest series of the classic era and of the franchise in general. As I said at the start of this video, my love for Series 3 remains unchanged, and it is still my favourite Thomas & Friends series of all time. So I was more than happy to watch through the first batch of episodes back to back with different dubs. But I am never doing a dub versus match for Thomas ever again. So what do you guys think? Do you agree with which dubs won for which episode? Do you think the early dubs should have won overall, or at least drawn with the official dubs? Do you have your own personal experience with them? Let me and everyone else know in the comments. Have a good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time you're watching this, and I'll see you in a bit.